Hey everyone, it's Mary. Welcome back to my channel, and I am excited to be back today to go over my November books that I read, my November wrap-up. I ended up reading 20 books in the month of November, which is about average for me, so I'm excited about that. But I wanted to kind of go through them all with you guys before we jump into that. There are a couple of announcements I need to make. First off is an apology to you guys because I have been absent from my channel for a while, and I know you guys are probably wondering where I went all of a sudden, but I was absent due to some health issues me and my dad have been having. We're still working through, but I feel well enough to record some videos for you guys. So here we are, and this couple other ones would be, apologize if you see this throughout the video, because I still have not figured out how to keep this from happening when I wear glasses. So I'm gonna try to so you don't see it as much. But anyway, FYI there. And then lastly, last video I did, I had a couple people recommend that I put my star levels and steam levels and all that below. So if you look in the description box, you will see that I do my star ratings on a 5-star scale. And I've also added what I call steam levels, which are kind of helping people know if they don't like books that have a lot of sex scenes in them, to know how much there is in the book, if there's any at all. So anyway, I'm not going to describe that in great detail. You can look in the description box area, whatever, and you can read that for yourself. But I hope that you guys find that helpful. I'm going to be looking at my list of books down here, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. All right, guys, we ready to jump in? 20 books, let's hit it. All right, first book I read, actually most of the books on this list were recommended to me, the first few were, so I'll explain them as I go. So first couple books were recommended in a couple of recommendation videos I watched. I can't remember who all recommended them, but there's been several different people who have recommended these first few books, so I decided to check them out. And the first one was called Transcendence by Shay. This one is talked about a lot on several channels, and I can see why, because it's definitely one of the most different books I've ever read. So it is a story that is a modern day woman and a man who's I don't know if he's Neanderthal, caveman. He's like a caveman. What's interesting about this book is that it's told from the man's point of view, and the man is supposed to be like a caveman Neanderthal type dude. So he doesn't speak modern day language. So I don't know how to explain it. It's written at the first chapter, I had trouble oh, I don't know if I can read this. It's written very choppy, very simple, short sentences, because she's trying to get across this whole caveman feel. He'll describe things to you, and because we live in today's society, we know what she's doing, but he, being a caveman, doesn't. So there's a couple scenes where it talks about her taking a mint leaf, and rubbing it on her teeth, and he's like, I don't know why she likes to make her mouth taste like this plant. And it's funny because you're she's brushing her teeth, dude, but he doesn't know what brushing teeth means because he's a caveman. They don't do that. So it's really actually unique and really well written. I loved it. And then surprisingly at the end I got super emotional, because I'm not going to ruin it, but at the end I got super emotional. And then at the end there's a last chapter that twists, and so you're left at the end is that the end of the book or the beginning of the book? And that explains how the modern day woman ended up in that time period with him. So really well, it's very different. I have not read anything like it before. I mean, I can't even compare it to another book. You almost just need to try it out, because it's that good. It is definitely a 5-star book for me, because I have never, like I said, never read anything like it. It's totally unique, totally unique. But steam level, probably maybe a 4.5 stars. It's not an erotic novel, because it's definitely plot driven, but it's definitely very detailed, the scenes that are there. So a little bit more on the sex scene level, but really a good story. I mean, if you can get past the choppier speech and get past all the really weirdness of it at first, it took me a couple chapters, but very, very good, and maybe one of my top ones I read this month for sure. Second book I read was on the same theme. It's Love in the Wild by Emma Castle. And this one was, I think, recommended in some of the same videos that I read before, or that I got the recommendation for Transcendence in. But it's a Tarzan retelling, and it is Thorne, who is Tarzan in this book, and Eden Matthews, who is Jane. And the two of them have a beautiful story. Like, I've read some Tarzan retellings, they're just not well done. They're very poorly done, or they're like BDSM erotica type stuff, which is not my cup of tea. What I love about this is you get so much backstory, and you really get to see the two of them get to know each other and fall in love. And I think it's so fun, some of the scenes that they do. There's a scene where you have Eden trying to explain to Thorne dating, and so there's some examples where he's like, well, or she tells him, like, you know, you spend time together and you eat together, and you know, and he's like, we spend time together, we eat together, does this mean we're dating? Like, it's really cute trying to explain it to him because he has no idea. And I really like this book. This is another 5-star book for me. Steam levels are probably like a 4. There's a few scenes that are detailed, but it's very well done, and it's definitely more plot. Like, there wasn't so many scenes in it that like you couldn't read the whole story. So if you're not into that sort of thing, was a good book, and I really enjoyed it. Next a few books I read were, because my NaNoWriMo novel for November was a mafia romance. That's kind of my spin on a mafia romance, because I just felt like doing something totally different than what I'm used to. And one of the things that's been recommended to me was if you're going to write something, you need to read it, because number one, you need to see what is already being done, make sure you're not copying, and make sure that, you know, yours is different enough to be worth writing, basically, is what I've always been told. So the first one that I looked up when I started looking for like mafia romance recommendations was The Italian by T.L. Swan. And this one was really good. It's actually more romance centered than mobster centered, which I thought was kind of cool. The story is about Enrico Ferrara and Olivia Reynolds, and Olivia is on a vacation to Italy with a friend, and while she's there, she meets Enrico, and they have like this week-long fling, basically, and they kind of spend the week together, and they fall in love, and they agree to meet each other in a couple weeks when she comes back to that area of Italy. But in that couple of weeks span, Enrico's father and grandfather pass away, and after they pass away, he finds out that he was not aware of it, but his family is the mob, and that his grandfather was a mob boss, and he had no clue. And now that they are gone, he has now inherited this job of being a mob boss, and had no idea his entire life that his family was involved in this. He thought they were just legitimate businessmen who had a lot of money from their businesses. He had no idea that they were like involved in crime and mafia stuff. So really cool. But what I loved about this particular book is that although you see that lifestyle and you see him have to come to terms with that, and you see how the two of them end up together, it's more romance centered. You hear about the lifestyle, but not in great detail. It's definitely more romance centered story. And for me, again, another 5-star book, and a steam level about 4 steams. There's some detailedness in there, but it's still a really good book and a really good story, and I enjoyed it. So I followed this one up by Cara Reilly's Born in Blood series. She has 6 books in her series, and this, every time I Googled like mafia romances, mafia romance fiction, she came up on every single list I found. So I was like, I have to read her books because she's on every list. And I will say that this series is good. It's easy to binge read because the books are not very long, but very, very graphic. Not only in sex scenes, but in violence. So the stories are bound by honor, bound by duty, bound by hatred, bound by temptation, bound by vengeance, bound by love. And the very first book in the series starts off with Aria Scuderi and Luca Vitello, something like that. And in this mafia culture, like it is in real life, they oftentimes will promise their children to other people for business deals, or different mob families will marry into other mob families, most of the time you are contracted or promised into a marriage, and it's 99% of the time a business deal of some sort. And so that's exactly what happens. Arya is basically promised to Luca, and so this is the beginning of them getting married because they've been promised to each other. And the very first book is her book, and then it goes through her two sisters, some other relatives of theirs, and then the last book, the sixth book in the series, goes through back to Arya and Luca. So I kind of liked that part of it, that it starts with them and ends with them, and you see her being very young. Like, she's like, I forget how old she is, 18 or 19 when she gets married, and then you see her several years later as she's kind of grown into herself, and they've been together, and you see that relationship and how it's grown in the time between the very first book and the very last book. But again, I will say this is definitely more mob-centered. Definitely more mob-centered. There's a lot of talk about the mob, how the mob works, how it's organized, violence, crime, very detailed crime scenes. And then the sex scenes in this book are very plentiful. There's a lot of it. Very graphic, very detailed. If that's not your cup of tea, this would be a hard book to get through. So I enjoyed the story, and I kept reading the entire series because she does a very good job of getting you interested in the characters and interweaving the stories so that you want to read the next book to figure out how it ends. So for example, in the very first book, the one sister ends up being like running away essentially, and the second book is the sister being found. So like, you know what I mean? Like you want to read the next book because you want to find out how it ends. So she does a very good job of that. And that's why I read all 6 books in the series, because I wanted to see how it ended. But again, overall, I would probably give it a 3. I thought the series was okay. It was good. It was great for my purposes of researching like mob romances. But again, not really my cup of tea because it's a lot of sex scenes and a lot of violence, which I don't love. But I think she does a great job of it. She has that follow-up series, which is the Camorra Chronicles, and I'm kind of going back and forth on whether or not I want to read that because there's a younger brother to Arya. His name is Fabiano, and the very first book of the Camorra Chronicles is Fabiano's story. So I kind of am like, I kind of want to read it because I want to see what's going on with Fabiano, but at the same time, I know she's going to suck me into like another 6 or 7 book series, and they're kind of, after reading this series, I had to step away and read something totally different because it is so graphic and like you get engrossed in this world of people that like are not very kind people. So you have to kind of walk away from it and do something totally lighthearted and different, which is what I did. But again, if you like that sort of thing, it is a very interesting series. So 3 stars, definitely 5 steams, not only on sex scenes, but like 5 on like graphicness as well. So then after that, I chose some more lighthearted stuff. I ended up going with my 10th book of the month was Bad Prince by Lilian Monroe. And this is a Cinderella retelling, which if you don't know anything about me, I love fairy tales. I was a Disney girl growing up, loved fairy tales. My mom had multiple versions of fairy tales for me growing up. I loved it. That was my jam. So anytime you have like a Beauty and the Beast retelling or a Cinderella retelling, I love those and I'm all about them. So I loved this idea. The Cinderella in the book is called Elle, duh, because Cinderella Elle makes sense. And then the prince's name is Charlie. In this particular book, Elle is a college student who has like a rowing scholarship at the college. And then the prince is the prince of obviously whatever country, city, whatever that this college is in. She meets him at the ball, duh, Cinderella retelling. And then they have like a one-night stand, essentially, where they end up in bed together, and then she takes off, and he has to find her, and she doesn't want him to know because she's from like a neighboring town that's like looked down upon, wrong side of the tracks kind of thing. And the thing that, I mean, it says it in the title, the subtitle is an accidental pregnancy romance. So I mean, you know there's going to be an accidental pregnancy. The author is very clear about it, but I usually hate those books. This one wasn't as bad, but I mean, is it my favorite book I've ever read in the whole world? No, but it was a fun read. I enjoyed it. For me, it's like a 3-star book, kind of middle of the road, and esteem level is probably like a 4. So not terrible. But again, would I want to reread this? Probably not. But it's a fun afternoon read. This would be a fun like beach read, something like that. That'd be good for that. Book 11 that I read was The Fey King's Curse by Jamie Schlosser. And this one was recommended to me by a couple people, and I almost didn't read it because I don't like sci-fi, I don't like fantasy, I don't like witches and elves and fictional beings, and like I like the only kind of fictional anything I will do is paranormal. Like I like vampires and I like werewolves and shapeshifters and things like that, but I'm not into aliens, I'm not into like elves and witches, I'm not into like, I don't know, fairies, and you know, I'm not into that, and it's not my thing. So I was like, the Fey King, like, ugh. But I went for it. It is about this guy named Kieran, who is the Fae, and Quinn, who is the lady in the book, and they actually meet when they are children because the Faes are able to come through realms to the human world, can't talk, and he's getting, I can't remember what he's getting, is it a flower or an herb? Some kind of herb or flower or something like that, and they make like a drink out of it or whatever. So he's coming over and he meets her as a child, and he's intrigued by her and he likes being around her, so he comes every year. So in Fae and human time is different. So one day in human world is 100 years in Fae, and the Faes, I guess, live to be like either super old or they're mortal, I'm not sure, I don't remember. And so he uses his one day a year that he can come over to the human realm to go see her. So she sees him every day, but he's seeing her every 100 years, which I thought was kind of interesting and a different twist. But anyway, they grow up, she grows up with him, and when she becomes like full grown, they realize they love each other. And there's a side story of him being blind, and then until he finds his fated mate, he can't see. Honestly, it was a good book and I actually really enjoyed it. I probably would give it like 3.5 stars-ish because I enjoyed the love story part of it. But a lot of the world building I didn't care about because, again, I'm not into fantasy. So like they're describing like the moons and how the sun rises and different plants they had and different colors of different rocks. And I'm like, I don't care. I really don't care. It's not my thing, but it was a nice love story. So I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I'm going to give this one 4 steams because the sex scenes in the book are detailed, but there's not very many of them. So it's easy to skip through if you don't want to read them. But, you know, the highlight of my November was the next 8 books that I read. The Bridgertons by Julia Quinn. For those of you who live under a rock and don't know this, the Bridgertons are being turned into a Netflix series, and I am super excited. The series is going to be released on Christmas, so if anybody wants to know what Mary's Christmas plans are, I will be watching the Bridgertons. So I first read this series when it first came out, and I loved it. This series, I think the first book, early 2000s, don't quote me on this because I don't have any like copyright dates up in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Julia first started writing this series in like the early 2000s maybe, and I remember reading them all. I mean, I read them all back when I lived on Roosevelt Street in Hammond with my family, so I remember this series clearly from back when I was like in college years. And it is the story of the 8 siblings, the Bridgertons, and each book follows each child's love story. So you have the Duke and I, the Viscount who loved me, an offer from a gentleman, romancing Mr. Bridgerton, when he was wicked. Oh, backwards. I had to Sir Phillip with love, then when he was wicked. It's in his kiss, and on the way to the wedding. And I have to tell you, I love all these books. I love this series so much. I've read them before, but it was so fun to go back and read them. It's historical romance. It's got this really cool subplot in the first several books where you've got Mrs. Whistledown, who's like in charge of the society papers, who basically you get like the real life story and then you'll get like the society paper article she wrote about whatever. So it's really cool. I love it. And about halfway through the series, you find out who Mrs. Whistledown is, which is kind of cool also. But then something really cool about this, because like I said, this is a reread for me. I've read all these books before. But what I loved about this rereading them is that she's finished the series and she's actually written second epilogues, which I think was released as an ebook, maybe. I think it was released as an ebook originally. So now I had their story, the first epilogue, which was included in the first book, and the second epilogue. And what's cool about it is the first epilogue is like a year or two after they're married and together, and then the second epilogue is like in the future, so it's like 10 or 15 years in the future. So it's really cool because you have like love story, year or two later, many years in the future, and it's cool to see like them all together at family functions and to see what they look like 15 years later. I love this series. Probably my favorite book in the series is maybe Anthony's story, The Viscount Who Loved Me. I think that's probably my there's several that are ties, but I think maybe Anthony's story is probably my favorite story. And then I think overall, books are mostly 5 stars. I think out of all 8 books, there might be 1 or 2 that are 4s, but the majority of the books in the series are definitely 5 stars for me. And then as far as steam level goes, 3 steams is pretty much what I give most of these books as well. There's definitely scenes in there, but for example, the scenes will happen later in the book, and usually the couples are either married, madly in love, and they've been together for a while. There's a whole lot of relationship and story building before anybody jumps in the sack with anybody else. And they're not graphic. They're written very like, I don't want to say flowery because that's the wrong term, but they're written very tastefully, and they're not overabundant. Like you get maybe 1 or 2 for book. Actually, I can't remember what book it is. It might have been either In His Kiss or On the Way to the Wedding. One of them only has like 1 scene, and I cannot remember which book it is. But there's a book in here that has like 1 scene. So I mean, 3 steams, 5-star books, 3 steams. If you have not read Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series, you need to. You will love this family, and you will see what the hype is. Also, if you're super bored later, check out the trailer for the Bridgetons. I will actually probably leave it in my description box, but I am excited for this series. Sometimes Netflix can ruin a few things, but hopefully they do a good job with this one because I'm super excited about it. And the last book I read was the only physical book, because every book I read this month was a ebook. This is the only physical book I read. It was my book of the month book. And this is the Starcrossed Sisters of Tuscany by Lori Nelson Spielman. And you guys, this is not a romance book. I don't remember what they like quantify this book as. It's not romance. Does it tell on here? I don't think it tells. Maybe it's just like regular fiction. No clue. Might have been chick lit. Not sure. All I know is that like I love this book, and I have to tell you, this is my favorite book that I read the entire month, and this is not a romance book. It is about the story of, it's kind of a multi-generational story. So you have 2 storylines going on. You have Emilia, who is the second-born daughter of the Fontana family. And in her family, there is this old curse that gets passed through the generations that many, many years ago, one of the women in the family was cursed, who was a second daughter, and that because of this curse, second daughters in the family never get married and never find true love. And so she's talking about at the very beginning about how you look back at the family tree and all of these second-born daughters are never married in the family. And so everybody believes that all the second-born daughters are completely cursed and that she's never going to get married. So here she is in her 20s. She's working at this bakery with her grandmother, and everyone kind of treats her like poop because they think, well, she's never going to get married. She's never going to have grandchildren. She's just going to do this for the rest of her life. And then she gets this letter out of the blue from her great aunt Poppy, which is her grandmother's sister, to come to Italy to visit her for her 80th birthday, and that they are going to go on a trip of Italy and break this stupid family curse. So she obviously goes to Italy because who would not, and she takes her cousin. And so you end up with these 2 storylines of the modern day Emilia, her cousin, and Aunt Poppy traveling through Italy and kind of doing all their stuff. But then you have this side story of Aunt Poppy telling her the family history of why the grandmother and Aunt Poppy are not getting along currently. They're fighting in the book. And so you have like the modern day story aligned with her retelling about the family history. I have to tell you, this is literally one of the best books I think I've read all year long. I've never read anything by Lori Nelson Spielman before, but I need to get on her website and find out what else she's written, because this was a phenomenal book, like phenomenal book. I actually finished the book. I had to like close the cover and just like take a minute to like stare, like I was lost. I just had to sit for like 10 minutes and just like digest it. I cried at the end of this book. Like, it was such a good story. And I don't want to give too many details because I'm going to ruin it for you guys. But let's just say it's a story of learning the truth. It's a story of forgiveness. It's a story of becoming your own person and standing up and becoming who you really are meant to be. And the way that it is just wrapped up at the end made me cry. And it is such a good book. Like, such a good book. It is not a romance book, and I did not care. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what else this author has written. So definitely a 5-star book for me. Esteem levels, it's only like a 1 steam, because there's a few things mentioned, but nothing that you really see in any great detail. And the one scene that could be considered 1 is like a closed door scene. So there's just not really much that you need to know. I mean, really, if you're going to read anything on this list, like this one, it's so good. I mean, I'm so, like, I can't rave about this enough. I cannot tell you enough good things about this book. So loved it. And I hope you guys check it out. So that is the 20 books I read. But really, out of the 20 books, I read 2 complete series. So that's okay. And in December, I'm going to try to do things a little bit differently, because these wrap-up videos are super long. They're like almost 25-30 minutes long. So I think that I'm going to start doing weekly reading vlogs for you, and then maybe do a wrap-up that like kind of wraps up a quick rundown of stars, but so that it's not such long videos for you guys. So hopefully starting next week, you'll see a weekly vlog, and I'll go over what I read that week with you guys, and then maybe do some individual videos just for like certain books that I want to do individually. I might do an individual video for this particular book because I loved it that much, but just an FYI. So what did you guys read in November? If you've already done your November wrap-up video, leave me a link below and let me know what's your favorite book that you read in November, and what are you most looking forward to reading in December? For me, I don't really have anything in particular that I'm most looking forward to in December yet, because I don't really have a TBR list for December, but can't wait to hear what you got on the list. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around if you've been here the whole video. Talk to you guys later. Bye.